So this first part is for either people who have never played TF2 or people that just don't know what a jump map is. These 5 classes can damage themselves with their weapons in some way to give themselves mobility. For 3 of these, the mobility they gain is either very limited, very impractical, or both. But for these 2, the soldier and the demoman, they have very versatile jumping options with both rocket jumping and sticky jumping. Simply put, you shoot explosives at your feet to fly really, really fast. People find this sort of thing really fun to do, but there's a lot of complex tricks that you can do that are not very practical in real games, simply because of how much health and ammo it would cost to do it. Things like sinks, where a soldier shoots a rocket while falling, then times a second rocket when they hit the ground to get multiple rockets worth of a boost. Or pogoing as demo, where you can keep yourself suspended in the air by rhythmically shooting and detonating stickies on the floor underneath yourself, so you never have to touch the ground. People find this sort of thing really fun, but they know it's not very practical in the base game of Team Fortress 2. So people created jump maps. Jump maps are community-created levels that act as assault courses for sticky jumping and rocket jumping. For the most part, maps are designed either specifically for soldier or specifically for demo, although they can usually complete each other's levels anyway. But these maps are community-created, none of them are mandated by Valve, so someone has to sit down and actually make these jump maps. And that is where this guy comes in.
Hi, I'm false _ I'm a jump mapper. I've made a good number of jumps over the course of 3 to 4 years now.
Oh, and False also works on this thing called Momentum Mod, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So how does a guy actually get into mapping? What's the motivation to start making your own maps instead of just playing other people's maps like everybody else does?
I started mapping because I was really tired of the maps that I kept seeing or kept having to play on servers, and I was like, these aren't the types of maps that I want to play. I wanted to create my own experience. And I've always made maps based on what I wanted to play. You have to play a lot of stuff that didn't really have that much thought or time put into it.
So turns out a man just plays one too many bad jump maps and it tips him over the edge. But he is right though. A lot of maps, especially the older ones, can be quite frustrating to play. They end up being poorly designed, gimmicky, and just downright ugly.
You know, I'm kind of so glad you've said that, because I always feel like a bit of an asshole when I'm in a Tempest server and I'm like, this map's terrible, and I'm not having fun. Like when I encounter like really old maps, or also maps that have a lot of like really weird gimmicks that are you don't see them in any other map, but you've encountered it in this one map, and now you have to figure it out for this one single map.
So something I was curious about is what happens before the map making actually begins. Before they even open their map making software, do mappers have a plan? Is there an idea of what they want it to look like? Do they know what jumps they want to feature? Do they have a theme, or do they just open Hammer Editor and get going?
I do like to think about the types of maps that I want to play at that moment, and then I think about, okay, well, what type of levels do I want to play, or maybe what type of maps are missing from the community, I guess, or the type of maps that I see are needed in a way, and that I also would enjoy. And that generally lends itself to a specific range of difficulty. I don't like to limit myself to a specific tier.
Wait, hold up a second. A specific tier? What does he mean by that? Well, jump maps are categorized by a tier system, tier 1 through to tier 6. Tier 1 maps are the easiest maps, comprising of very simple and beginner-friendly jumps, and tier 6 maps are the hardest maps there are, or at least they're supposed to be anyway. As time has gone on, 6 tiers has proven to be not enough, because some tier 6 maps are worlds apart in difficulty from others. And there are also tier 0 maps that are literally impossible to complete, but we won't talk about that here.
I don't like to limit myself to a specific tier. I like to just make whatever is good, and whatever ends up being good. I don't want to, like, I guess, make it more challenging than it needs to be or should be.
Yeah, if it's too challenging to be fun, then what's the point in making the map?
Right, yeah.
Or too easy to be fun, I guess.
Yeah, I think about what I want, and then when I think about like the type of gameplay that I want to try to make, I start then sketching out individual levels.
What, like sketching?
In most cases,
literally
like,
sketching on a.
I have this little notebook,
right,
that I have at my desk side, and I have a pen, and I just sketch a ton of ideas into this like notebook whenever I make a new map. As I got more into mapping, and I also got better at jump because I was just playing jump a lot more. And so you can sort of see the progression of difficulty
of how you've
and the type of maps that have been made. Yeah. Hardware was a pretty prominent step in my, I guess, skill level. That was a tier 6 map that I just could barely complete myself at the time of creating. And now I can flawless the map now, which is cool to see.
Yeah.
Jump maps are much more like platformers than first-person shooters. The goal of a normal TF2 map involves killing enemies, pushing a payload cart, capturing a control point. All of these things, in one way or another, involve combat. In jump maps, the only goal is to get from here to over there without touching the ground. The goal of the levels have changed, which means that the level design has to change with it. 2D and 3D platformers often skip formal tutorials. Instead, they will use level design elements to guide you into understanding the concepts that they want to teach.
So I think that's pretty important, just to have some type of base design language in your map. A lot of maps don't or ignore having some type of language of what is intended for what.
When he says design language or level language, he means the way information is conveyed to the player without any worded tutorials. This is the part of the ground that you can stand on, and this is the part that you can't. Part of a map having its own level language is having these surfaces be very clearly defined. The map's language is the certain textures that it uses to discern different interactable surfaces from each other. You can shoot this, but you can't shoot this. You can stand on this, but you can't stand on this. In most maps, this is done with very clearly different colored and textured surfaces, but in some maps it can be done with just a difference in elevation between one spot and another spot.
It's easy to make the mistake of not really understanding how other people are going to think about your map when they're playing it for the first time, because as a mapper you understand exactly where everything is, why everything is there, generally. And so you know exactly what you intended, but other people may not, right? So you may overlook things that may not be initially obvious to other people, but are incredibly obvious to you. I think the direction and what a beginner would how they understand a jump map or what they're supposed to do, that's mostly directed through just having directive level design, and that means a very intentional way of doing a jump, and I guess you could anti-cheat other unintended
limit the ways that you do it. That's not intended.
Mechanics, and so you have to you force the player into sort of like a certain path or intention in order to force them to, I guess, learn whatever you intend them to do. And also keeping options open, I think, is good. Letting players experiment with what they can get away with and what they can do. So letting players shoot up a bunch of walls, even if it's not the intended way.
They can jank their way through the jump if they can figure out a way to
do it. I think the best way of, directing a player is through just geometry, and not really using heavy amounts of anti-cheat. Just geometry and clear teleports, I think, is the most natural and organic, I suppose, way of level design. You don't have walls just eating up rockets.
A formal tutorial that pops text up on your screen is only really going to be used when the concept is too complex to convey to a player with wordless level design elements. Like how bounces in a lot of jump maps will bring up a text box onto their screen to tell the player what to do.
How to actually tell players what you're supposed to do, and this is especially prevalent in soldier level design, because there's a lot of different types of mechanics instead of just demo where it's just stickies.
With bounces, there's almost always a worded tutorial, which is really rare in jump maps. It's really rare in jump maps to have words written on the wall or a little node that you stand on that you can read text that says you jump, crouch, bounce off the foot. That's really rare.
It's a pretty weird thing.
Yeah.
If you just think about it outside of jump, hey, there's this sprawling speedrun map, but then you have to stand here if you don't.
You have to stand here and read this one text bubble.
Read this little node that pops up and with crappy text right over your crosshair, and then it's hey, you have to do a specific setup to anyway, that's just
slowly fades into your, it like slowly fades in front of your crosshair and then stays there for slightly too long to where it's annoying. And then it goes away.
But generally speaking, maps use things like lines on the ground, bright lights at your destination, and see-through walls that allow you to see what comes next to help a player understand what's going on. It's not too dissimilar to this room in Celeste. These blocks move across these rails whenever the player dashes. When the player first encounters these blocks, they're in a room completely devoid of all danger where they can safely mess around with the concept. Jump maps do similar things, give the player a very simple version of the jump to beat before they're shown to the harder stuff a little bit later. But jump maps don't have to always do this though.
When you're dealing with more complicated mechanics or complicated tiers, people are going to be experienced a little. Like, you're sort of expecting that from the player, so then they have this intrinsic knowledge of jump design and jump spacing. It's pretty interesting sometimes when you can have 3 platforms, right, at different elevations, and they're all textured the same, but the player knows what to do just because of the spacing, like how high things are.
Just by looking at the separation of these platforms.
Yeah, like this is a speed shot, this is a skip, this is a maybe like a catch or something. They should be textured differently. I made this mistake on last of Jump Grotto. I think like there's like 2 rocks, literally the same texture, but you know to skip off of one and then speed shot on another and then skip off so there is some things like if you space things in an expected way, then players will intrinsically know what to do there.
One of the most interesting things to note about jump maps is that there are multiple completely different classes that can beat these maps. There are maps specifically designed for demo and specifically designed for soldier, and even then the engineer can beat most jump maps. These classes are all completely different from each other in the way that they complete these maps, so jumps have to be designed and made completely differently to accommodate each class. And I was very curious how a map maker considers the players that pick the wrong class in a map. When a mapper makes a soldier map, do they think about how a demo is going to complete it? Or when they make a demo map, do they think about how a soldier might complete it?
Yeah, a lot of maps don't give much consideration to off-classing, and it's generally considered in the community that's like it's okay, because ultimately you shouldn't have to tailor a map's experience to a class that was entirely unintended. Because soldier jumping and rock, like sticky jumping, demo jumping, they're basically separate game modes, right?
Yeah. They are completely different.
Yeah, it's very hard to balance one single map for 2 different game modes with the same geometry.
Other than, I guess, what you did in Autumn, where it's like, this one's the demo one, and that one's the soldier one. That works quite well, but that's
it's also a lot more. You're basically making 2 maps, right? At that point, and I was fine with, I wanted to do that in that map in particular, but
you wouldn't do it every time.
I haven't done it every time. No. I think it's a lot to ask for of people to, well, a lot of people don't play demo, or maybe a lot of people don't play soldier, or they don't have good experience with soldier, or they don't care about the other class, the other game mode, right?
I really liked the comparison to different game modes there, and he's right too. Demo and Soldier are so different from each other in jump maps that they're basically different game modes. So balancing a single map around both of those things is difficult outside of just making 2 different courses for each class. And jumping is a speedrun oriented game mode. People love to speedrun jump maps, and there are even servers dedicated to doing this. Most notably the Tempest servers, where all the best players in the world are competing to beat all of the maps as fast as possible. Trying to balance out how fast both of the classes can do each section and how smooth it feels to do so would be incredibly difficult to do well, which is why most maps just don't try and do it at all. On the note of speedrunning, I was curious as to what sort of thing you have to keep in mind when designing a level for a speedrun oriented game mode.
And that's a bit of an unfortunate side with mapping for a speedrun oriented game mode, because you can't really make revisions after the final release. Even if that's like where you would get the most feedback.
The best players in the business are all in this like speedrun community, so they're they're not only the most vocal, but they're the people with the most informed opinions. You know, some like guy who installed the game 15 minutes ago saying he hates your map is irrelevant, right? It only matters if the guy is really good.
I mean, it's a tier 6. You can't play it.
Yeah, exactly. You're not allowed to play. Go play Jump Beef. When you're making the map, you're considering the speedrun element of the map, right?
Yeah, definitely now. Especially in the past like year or two.
Since you got a lot better.
I've been making a lot more speedrun oriented maps.
So the last thing I wanted to touch on is a thing called Momentum Mod. It originally started as a community-driven effort to give surfing and bunny hopping, two other movement game modes from TF2 and Counter-Strike, their very own standalone game. But the communities from other Source movement games heard about what the guys at Momentum Mod were doing, and they asked if they could help put their own game modes into Momentum 2. So nowadays, Momentum Mod will contain a version of rocket jumping, sticky jumping, surfing, bunny hopping, conch jumping, and even really niche stuff like defrag running from Quake. False is one of the people working on the jump section for Momentum Mod, and I wanted to know more about how that was going at the time.
Momentum Mod, it's Source.
Right.
Recently they got engine license from Valve, and so they were able to look at the source code of Source Engine and actually change things up, and they've been working on with a group called the Portal 2 Community Edition guys, those devs.
Yeah.
They've been working on basically a better Source engine, Source 1 engine, that is. Yeah, it's Source 1 with a bunch of improvements called the Chaos engine. And so the devs on the Momentum team have been working really hard to port the game to that, and it's gonna I believe the future of Jump.
Right, that's going to be where it goes, because TF2, bear in mind, is approaching 14 years old.
Yeah.
So it needs a new home, right? And as they keep releasing Counter-Strike games, you know, Counter-Strike's going to have Surf for like forever, basically. But Jump is sort of living and dying with TF2. So if TF2 dies, so does Jump. And I guess Momentum Mod's a way to sort of save it from dying with TF2.
Yeah. Momentum Mod is taking a bunch. I think we have kind of upwards 10 different game modes, movement game modes, all putting that into like one
so I know there's
amazing package.
There's Jump and Surf, right? But what
Jump,
other ones are there?
Surf, there's also B-Hop.
Oh, true.
There is A-Hop, which is accelerated hopping.
Oh.
That's the Half-Life 2 movement.
ABH, yeah, the
ABH,
weird backwards flying.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. If you've ever seen a Half-Life 2 speedrun, that's the movement there, and it's really crazy, but it's also very
so there's
difficult
maps
to
for that?
grasp. People are making maps for that.
That's really cool.
There are a few maps. Shout out to Embellis, who put all of the coast levels in Half-Life into one singular map, so you can run the entirety of coast in one seamless map.
That's really cool.
It is so cool. And Embellis worked very, very hard on trying to put that together and make it work.
Right.
So
that's very impressive.
It is, again, open source, and it's all community effort. Goknak, the project lead of Momentum Mod, is working on his own time, and he has a job.
Yeah, and he's just coming away and doing.
But he's doing incredible work, and there's also a bunch of other developers that have been getting on.
So after talking about all things Jump and all things Momentum Mod, I just wanted to ask one last fun question to end the interview off with. What is your favourite Jump map that isn't your own Jump map? So other than the ones you made, what's your favourite number one best Jump map ever made?
That's hard to answer, because there are some maps that are very, very, very good, and maps that I take some inspiration from, right? And I applaud the mapper and just what it is. But also, there are maps that I really enjoy playing that I know are objectively bad. For some reason, I just love that map. So could I give one answer for each then?
Sure. So yeah, why not?
All right.
Give me two.
All right.
The diplomatic approach. Go on then.
Right. A map that I think is just a really amazing map that stood out to me. There's a map called Jump Forgotten by Maxi, and I think it's I think it was a really incredibly well made map. A lot of great level design. My all-time favorite map just to play is Jump Homie.
Jump Homie.
I don't know if you've ever played or seen it. It's a tier 5 demo map. It has a lot of down airs. It's got a texture scheme that I refer to nowadays as Egypt Dev.
I know exactly what you mean. I think I know the exact textures you mean.
It's the like the default Egypt textures.
Yeah, they're
There's
everywhere.
like 4 of them that people use for everything, and it goes against like a lot of things. In a lot of ways, it goes against what I think is a good map. It doesn't have connectors. All my maps have connectors.
Oh, is it just
I think it
teleport
flows
from
better.
one to the next?
It just stored, yeah. It has pretty bland lighting. Everything is pretty much like full bright, almost looking. It doesn't look great, but for some reason, I freaking love playing that map.
It's your favorite in spite of all of its flaws. Is there anything you want to say as like a send-off, as like a shout out to my main man, or you know, this guy's really cool? Anything you want to plug?
I guess Momentum Mod. Yeah, I mean, check out Momentum Mod. I think it's a really amazing project, especially if you're interested in jump or just source movement in general. It's 0 ping jumping with social like connectivity as well. So
now it's my turn to send off. A massive thanks to False for agreeing to do this interview with me, because it was a blast to do. And if this video piqued your interest, I'll leave links in the description to some good jump servers for people to go try out. Tempus is a good place to go if you've already been jumping for a while, but if you need to learn the rope, then Jump Academy is where you should be going instead. And I have spent way too many hours of my life playing jump maps. So maybe the next step in my jump journey is to indoctrinate some more people into being jump goblins like I am. Thanks for watching.